you want to become more flexible with life, if you want to be strong instead of brag when things get hard, I'm going to explain exactly how to do it. Because the truth is, if you are struggling to adapt, you are probably approaching the whole thing with a suboptimal strategy. Being rigid and hard on yourself isn't strength, it is actually the opposite. I have spent years going down the rabbit hole, the psychology, the research, the actual mechanics of why some people stay flexible under pressure while others snap. And the secret is that resilience isn't about resisting harder, it's about understanding how your own nervous system actually works. So in this video, I'm gonna give you the full breakdown, the 5 non-obvious things about building relaxed flexibility in life, the same things the people who bounce back easily already understand and that you may not. These are 5 non-obvious lessons about self-compassion, the same ones that researchers have known for decades, but that almost nobody actually applies to their own lives. Let's get into it. Point 1. Compassion isn't softness. It is safe to signal your brain needs to function. Here's the reframe. You think compassion is unnecessary softness is actually the opposite. It is a biological requirement, not an emotional luxury. Let me explain the mechanism. For most of human history, we didn't have unlimited food, unlimited safety, or unlimited resources. Our brains evolved a threat system whose entire job is to scan for danger and react fast. That doesn't system know the difference between a predator and a stressful email. It just knows to fire. And the only thing that turns that system off isn't logic. It is safety. Specifically, it is the feeling of being cared for. Research has found that compassion, kindness, and encouragement from others have a measurable impact on our brains, our bodies, and our general sense of well-being. Receiving warmth doesn't just feel nice, it tells your nervous system the world is safe and other people are helpful. That's not a metaphor. That's a direct psychological signal. And when you criticize yourself inside, your brain reads that exact same journal as under attack. You are quite literally telling your own nervous system that isn't safe every single day. This isn't just an idea I pick up somewhere. This is the case of clinical research. Clinical psychologist Paul Gilbert is the person who actually mapped this system out. He developed what's called compassion theory after noticing that a lot of his patients understood their problems perfectly well on an intellectual level. They just couldn't feel any better because knowing something and feeling safe are two completely different systems in your brain. His work is the reason we can even talk about compassion as a biological mechanism instead of a self-help. He mapped out 3 core emotional systems we all run on: a threat system, a drive system, and a soothing system. And his research shows that most of us live almost entirely in the first, so barely ever landing in the third. Think about how this shows up in relationship. You meet a partner and maybe you are both in some version of stress mode. Instead of soothing each other, you trigger each other. You see your partner anxious, and instead of understanding what's underneath that, you feel threatened yourself. Two threat systems bouncing off each other with nobody swinging into safety. This is why relationships that should feel restorative often feel exhausting instead. Nobody is turning to soothing system on. We are all individually responsible for managing our own threat system, but almost nobody was ever taught how. So here's the tactical piece. Stop treating compassion like a mode you either have or don't have. Treat it like system. You have to deliberately switch on the same way you would deliberately calm your breathing before a stressful meeting. You do this by noticing the moment your inner voice turns critical and consciously replacing it, not with empty positivity, but with the tone you would use on someone you actually care about. Safety isn't optional for your brain. Point 2. Being hard on yourself doesn't make you driven. It's just your trait system in disguise. Here's the second reframe. You think self-criticism is what keeps you sharp. Discipline ahead of the competition is actually brain system mislabeled as motivation. We are born seekers and wonders because for most of our evolutionary history, our baseline state was survival. That's why it is so easy for us to switch into scarcity mode, chase mode, achievement mode, and so hard for us to switch into contentment. Contentment on some deep evolutionary level still registered as dangerous. It feels like laziness, it feels like falling behind. So we never actually get taught how to rest in it. We just keep chasing and calling the chasing drive. I lived a huge chunk of my life in burnout without even noticing it because I never learned to check in with my own mind. We are so used to running on the success tool of our higher level thinking that we lose contact with what's actually happening our body and mind, and what's happening underneath is actually an old threat system dressed up in the language of ambition. Our rational mind can be hijacked by much older, more primitive emotions without us ever realizing it is happening. It just feels like being realistic or just staying sharp. Here's the tactical distinction. Drive that comes from threat feels like relief when you finish, not satisfaction, relief, because the danger has passed for now. Drive that comes from genuine values feels like meaning. Even mid-tasks, start noticing which one you are actually running on. If every finished project just resets right back into anxiety about the next one, that's not motivation. That's your threat system running the show, borrowing the language of productivity to keep you moving. You cannot out hustle a nervous system that doesn't feel safe. You can only teach it safety directly. And point three, you cannot get belonging from other people. It has to come from you first. Here's the third reframe, and this one is uncomfortable. You think if you just get enough love, attention, or validation from the right people, the emptiness goes away. It doesn't, because you are trying to fill a compassion gap with a connection strategy. And those are two different systems entirely. We have lots of roles, but underneath all of them, there is something quieter asking what your soul actually wants. And a lot of us are chasing that answer through other people, seeking love from a partner who isn't available, wanting the same validation from every friend, noticing that people don't call you for lunch and reading that as proof of something painful about you about instead of just they don't want to call you. So here's the mechanism why this doesn't work. This specific kind of love and compassion, the kind that actually settles your nervous system, you cannot receive it from others as a substitute for giving it to yourself. It doesn't transfer that way. You can have someone who loves you deeply and still feel unworthy because the criticism is coming from your inside, running 24 hours a day, louder than anything anyone else could say to counter it. This is why relationships alone don't fix self-hatred, and why the people you would assume are the most loved, the successful, the followed, the admired, are so often the ones privately convinced they don't deserve any of it. They say, I'm not nice, I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy. That belief doesn't respond to more external proof because it was never actually about the evidence. We also live in a world that quietly encouraged connection instead of nurturing caring relationship. We are constantly comparing our cars, our homes, whether what we have measures up to what someone else has. Living inside that competitive framing leaves a lot of us feeling disconnected, lonely, and unworthy, even when nothing has technically gone wrong in our lives. That disconnection is one of the quiet underlying reasons so many of us suffer without being able to name why. The tactical shift: stop judging your relationships for missing love and start judging your inner voice for missing kindness. That's where the actual gap is. And point four, your inner critic isn't a personal flaw, it's an old unlearned pattern that isn't your fault. Here's the fourth reframe. You think your harshest self-criticism reflects the truth about who you are. This is actually just a pattern you inherited running on autopilot that you never consciously choose. Understand your shadow for a second. Why are you so against certain things in other people? Why can't you tolerate certain traits, certain behaviors, certain kinds of people? Maybe you are quick to anger because as a child, nobody ever put health limits on your anger, so it never learned its own shape. Maybe you can't stand controlling people because you grew up with one. These aren't random reactions, they are reflections, patterns passed down without your permission, running quietly in the background of every judgment you make, including the ones you make about yourself. And when we don't understand these patterns, we avoid them instead through drinking, through overworking, through numbing, through any of the dozens of ways we cope instead of feel. But avoidance commonly leads to more trouble, not less, because you can't actually destroy a feeling by ignoring it. It exists whether you acknowledge it or not. It just goes underground and runs the show from there inside. Here's the part that changes everything once you actually get it. You didn't design your own mind. What goes on in there, the patterns, the judgments, the harsh inner voice is shaped by your environment. your experiences, your genetics long before you had any say in the matter. Blaming yourself for having this pattern is like blaming yourself for the color of your eyes. If you want a reliable recipe for making yourself unhappy, it's simple. Just keep focusing on everything you dislike about yourself. And the tactical move here isn't to silence the pattern, it's to name it. Next time you catch yourself in a wave of self judgment, ask why you first heard something like that, say it to you in the exact tone. You will usually find an answer, and the moment you do, you stop fighting yourself and start recognizing and old recordings from exactly what it is. And point five, compassion is trainable like a muscle, not a personality trait you either have or don't. Here's the last reframe. You think some people are just naturally kind to themselves and you are not one of them. It's actually a skill, and skills are built through repetition, not luck. If you are struggling to feel compassion for yourself right now, it is simply because you don't have enough experience with it yet, not because something is wrong with you. Practice creating the experience deliberately, a felt sense in your body of warmth, kindness, and support, not just as a thought you have once and move on from, but as something you sit in the same way you would sit in any other trained state. Research shows that people who are struggling emotionally are actually less able to be kind or forgiving with themselves in the exact moments they need it most. Right after a mistake, right after a failure, right in the middle of conflict. That's not your character. Think of compassion like a multivitamin for your mind. Your brain needs to be fed and nurtured the same way your body does. And skipping it doesn't make you stronger, it just leaves you running on deficit. This is also why the fear that self kindness will make you lazy or unmotivated doesn't hold up. It is the opposite. A mind that feels safe has more capacity, not less. It is a constantly threatened mind that burns out, stalls, and avoids the tactical version. Once a day, deliberately recall a moment you are genuinely care for and a moment you help someone else. Don't scroll past it. Sit in it for a 60 full seconds and let your body actually register it. Repeat it daily. This is one of the most important ways to build a neural pathway tied to feeling safe and connected, and the exact pathway self-criticism shuts down every single time. So let's recap. One, compassion isn't softness, it's a safety signal your brain needs to function. Two, being hard on yourself isn't trap, it is your threat system wearing a disguise. Three, belonging has to come from you first before it can come from anyone else. Four, your inner critic isn't your personality, it is an old unlearned pattern that was never your fault to begin with. And five, compassion isn't a trait you either have or don't. It is trainable the same way any other skill is trainable. None of this is about becoming soft or lowering your standards or letting yourself off the hook. It's about finally giving your nervous system the one thing it has been missing this whole time, a sense that is safe enough to stop fighting itself. If any of these five hit you the way it hit me the first time I actually understood it, that's genuinely why I make this kind of content. This isn't theory I read about once, it's the actual practice I come back to whenever my own inner critic gets lost. I will be going deeper into compassion. Let me know in the comments which of the five landed hardest for you. So if you liked the video, please hit the like button. Thank you for listening. I love you.